hip to this kind of stuff. I'm here tonight to blow the lid off it, to be the whistleblower. I'm sick and tired of the secrets and the lies. Sorry, hold on. I just got to get this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was exactly 9:30 a.m. on June 2nd, 2025. The air in Los Angeles Superior Court, Department 103, hung thick and heavy, as if the room itself was holding its breath. All eyes turned, not to the defendant, but to the unexpected figure seated in the front row reserved for witnesses. Jim Carrey. But this was not the Jim Carrey the world had adored, not the comedic whirlwind of rubber-faced grins and irreverent charm. This was a man transformed. His salt-and-pepper hair framed a gaunt face, lined with the kind of weariness time alone couldn't inflict. His blue eyes, once alight with mischief, now stared ahead, hollow, distant, and haunted. Dressed in a plain gray suit stripped of any Hollywood glimmer, Carrey sat with a quiet gravity. His presence in the courtroom, at this trial, felt like a thunderclap no one had seen coming. He had fought for years to forget what he knew, but memory, like justice, has a way of demanding its due. At the defense table sat Sean Diddy Combs, the music mogul whose empire had cast a long shadow over the industry. His expression was unreadable, calm, almost smug, but Carrey saw through it. He saw the same mask, the same defiant arrogance that had once silenced countless voices. That's why Jim was here. For the ones who couldn't speak. Chief. Prosecutor. Sarah Jenkins approached the podium, her tone sharp and composed. "Your Honor," she began, "what we will present today is not just shocking, it's essential. It pulls back the glittering curtain hiding a series of brutal truths. Truths long buried beneath money, fame, and fear." The courtroom lights dimmed. A large screen flickered to life, its black frame bearing the quiet title. Tape clap. A soft click echoed, and then chaos. Diddy froze mid-sip. His glass shattered against the marble floor. In an instant, his mask cracked. He leapt to his feet, voice erupting into the chamber. "This is a setup! Lies! Lies!" His eyes were bloodshot, wild. He lunged toward the screen as if to tear it from the wall, but the footage had already begun. Security rushed in to restrain him. Across the room, Jim Carrey sat perfectly still, eyes closed. A single tear traced down his cheek. He didn't need to see the video. He already knew what it contained. He had lived it. Judge Evelyn Thorne struck her gavel, once, twice, but her call for order was drowned in the rising frenzy. "This is grotesque." Diddy howled as guards dragged him back, thrashing. Finally, the judge raised her voice with chilling finality. "Given this uncontrolled outburst, I am calling a 30-minute recess." "The court will reconvene when order can be assured," murmurs turned to roars as the gallery erupted. Reporters scrambled, lawyers whispered urgently. But Jim Carrey remained unmoved, staring straight at the screen. 30 minutes. That's all the time he had before he would rise and speak. Not as a celebrity, not as a witness, but as a survivor. This was his reckoning. When court resumed, the tension was unbearable. The gallery was packed once again, the air electric with dread and anticipation. Diddy's seat was empty. Whether he was calming down or spiraling further was unclear, but the damage was done. His eruption had spoken louder than any opening statement. Prosecutor Jenkins returned to the podium. This time she wore the faintest shadow of a knowing smile. Not of triumph, but of vindication. The truth was coming, and there would be no going back. A smile played on her lips. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we call our next witness." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowded benches where cell phones were subtly raised for covert recordings. The cameras of major news outlets, like CNN and NBC News, were locked in place, awaiting a moment of historical significance. We call Mr. Jim Carrey to the stand. A wave of stunned disbelief rippled through the courtroom. Jim Carrey, the legendary comedian, the man who had brought laughter to millions, what could possibly connect him to a trial so steeped in dark accusations? The man who entered was not the Jim Carrey of Ace Ventura or The Mask. Gone was the high-energy eccentric of decades past. Instead, he was gaunt, older, with streaks of gray threading through his hair. Deep lines marked his face, and his once vibrant blue eyes now carried a weight, a sadness, perhaps even emptiness. He wore a modest gray suit, devoid of any Hollywood flair. No bravado, just a man burdened by truths long concealed. He stepped up to the witness stand. His oath was spoken softly, barely more than a whisper. The courtroom held its breath. The transformation alone was enough to signal that whatever Jim Carrey had come to reveal, it would not be light-hearted. Prosecutor Jenkins began with a tone gentler than before, measured and almost reverent. Mr. Carrey, please tell us about your relationship with the defendant, Sean Combs. Carrey drew a deep breath, steadying himself. I knew Sean from the late 90s, he began, voice trembling. Back then, I was at the peak of my career. Everything was busy, overwhelming even, but I also felt lonely. He paused. He approached me, said he admired my work and wanted to take me to the next level. He talked about creativity, breaking boundaries, a tier that only certain people could reach. He let out a bitter, humorless chuckle. It sounded appealing. Didn't it? He looked down. Sean had a peculiar charisma, a kind of confidence that made you want to follow him, be part of whatever world he was building. He described a world drenched in glamour and power, lavish parties, secret locations, introductions to names that moved headlines. I met everyone, he said. Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, they were all there. The atmosphere was electric, intoxicating, but his tone shifted. There was always something beneath the surface. The courtroom sat frozen. Jim Carrey didn't just talk about parties. He spoke of closed-door gatherings, of favors, dressed up as eccentricities, of slowly encroaching unease. At first it was small things, he recalled. A strange request at a party, a suggestion that felt harmless, but it always left you slightly off kilter. He hesitated. Then it became darker. His voice was quieter now, more strained. It was like a spider web. You didn't feel it wrapping around you until it was too late. Each thread was invisible, but everyone pulled you deeper. The room was utterly still. This wasn't the entertainer people had come to adore on movie screens. This was a man exposing wounds long hidden. In the third row, a man, likely a former Combs associate, nodded faintly, eyes glazed with a weary recognition. Mr. Carrey, Prosecutor Jenkins continued, her voice as heavy as it was gentle, please tell the jury about a specific event, the one you referred to as a ritual. Carrey closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they glistened. A bitter smile touched his lips trembled slightly as he began. It was around mid-2003, I remember because it was July, a hot evening at Sean's Miami villa. Jim Carrey's voice was quiet but steady, drawing the jury in. He told me it was time for me to break through, to be reborn as a greater artist. He paused, blinking slowly. Naive as I was, I thought it was just an artistic metaphor. He opened his eyes and looked directly at the jury. He led me into this room, a huge, private spa-like space. In the center there was a massive white marble bathtub, but it wasn't filled with water. He swallowed hard. It was filled to the brim with tomato sauce, thick, dark red tomato sauce, almost congealed, just sitting there. A small gasp rippled through the courtroom. Some people frowned. Others covered their mouths, their disbelief palpable. I looked at Sean, completely confused. Carrie said, his voice beginning to tremble. I asked, "What is this, Sean?" He paused, and he smiled. A sinister, cold smile. There were two of his assistants standing nearby, completely silent. One held a white towel. The other had an old video camera. "This is purification, Jim," he said. "This is how the great are born. You have to leave your old self in the water, wash away what's holding you back." Carrie's voice dropped lower, shaking, with the memory. He looked at me with eyes that weren't kind, only calculating. He said, "You want to be a legend, right? This is the first step. A fresh start." There was a long silence before he spoke again. "I was terrified," he admitted, and a single tear rolled down his gaunt cheek. "It felt like I was in a horror film, but worse because it was real. I was trapped. He was Diddy." I kept thinking, if I say no, will he destroy my career? Can he make me vanish? He took a breath that seemed to scrape his lungs raw. And I knew the answer. Yes, he could, and he would. His next words came slowly, his face drawn, with shame. "Either you do this or you never belong in this world," he said. "Never. Make your choice." I stepped in. I submerged myself in that bathtub filled with cold, thick tomato sauce. I felt disgusted with myself, but I did it. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. A juror coughed softly. Few reporters scribbled frantically, their hands shaking. "It was repulsive," Carrie continued. "The sauce clung to me. It was supposed to be purification, but I felt filthier than ever. And Sean, he just stood there smiling. He didn't say another word, but his eyes, they said, 'You're mine now.' He was quiet for a moment before finishing. I stayed in there for maybe 10 minutes, then I got out. He handed me the towel himself. I showered, but the feeling of defilement never left me. I didn't do it out of belief, I did it out of fear, and that's a scar I carry to this day. Prosecutor Jenkins approached the stand with a small, sealed box, placing it gently in front of him. "Mr. Carey," she said softly, "are you aware of a tape often referred to as the Clapp tape?" Carey nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw it. Once." "Can you describe what you saw, to the best of your memory?" His eyes flicked away, then back. "I don't know if I can describe all of it. Not clearly." His voice broke slightly. "But I remember what it felt like." He exhaled shakily. "It was a compilation of moments where Sean controlled people, humiliated them, forced them to do things they didn't want to do. There were celebrities in it. I remember Usher. He looked so young, so scared. He'd lived at Diddy's house when he was just a kid." He paused, his voice tightening. "And I saw Lindsay Lohan. She was just a teenager then. She looked completely lost, panicked, like she couldn't even tell what was real anymore. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, camera shutters clicking wildly. The press section leaned forward en masse. "Your Honor," Jenkins said, turning to Judge Thorne, "we submit that this tape reveals a consistent pattern, not isolated incidents, but part of a deliberate system of psychological manipulation." Carey continued, his gaze unfocused, as if reliving something he couldn't unsee. "That tape brought it all back. The isolation, the fear, like being in a gilded cage where nothing is real and no one can help you. Sean made himself the center of everything. He made you feel like only he could protect you, but he was also the only one who could destroy you, and he loved knowing that." "Mr. Carey," Jenkins asked gently, "did you ever witness the defendant behaving this way with others?" He nodded faintly. "Many times. At parties, at his villas. I saw young women stumble out of rooms crying, clothes disheveled. I saw celebrities passed out while others laughed and took pictures. Leonardo DiCaprio told me once, back in 2005, that he saw things too. Strange things. But he said he'd never speak of it. He was too afraid. Carrie's voice grew cold. These weren't parties. They were rituals. A system. Designed to break you, to strip you of your dignity and power. The price of entry was your conscience. And I paid it. His final words settled over the room like fog, heavy and inescapable. It nearly destroyed me. The silence that followed was thick with disbelief and grief. These weren't tales of Hollywood excess. These were testimonies of exploitation, fear, and control, allegations that had the power to burn the entire House of Fame to the ground. Abuse, long whispered about in the shadows of the entertainment industry, had now been dragged into the light by one of Hollywood's most beloved icons. Following Jim Carrey's explosive testimony on June 2, 2025, even the most composed members of the jury, particularly several male jurors who had kept impassive expressions throughout the trial, visibly recoiled in horror. The effect was instant and seismic. This was no longer rumor or speculation. This was sworn testimony, damning and detailed from an industry legend. Hollywood reeled. What had once been dismissed as gossip was now being re-examined with fresh and furious scrutiny. Social media erupted. Archival clips and forgotten anecdotes resurfaced, now cast in a deeply disturbing new light. Among them, a decades-old video of Michael Jackson praising Diddy as a visionary and a trustworthy friend. But the reverence of that clip now felt eerie and misplaced. According to an insider, Jackson's legal team had contacted their attorneys the night before, urgently reviewing previous testimony. It was a chilling twist. If those who had once stood behind Diddy were now quietly distancing themselves, or, worse, preparing to reverse their positions, then Carrey's testimony had done more than shake the room. It had shaken the very foundation of celebrity power. The pressure on Diddy and his legal team intensified, the weight of it pressing down like a slow, merciless countdown. A cultural reckoning was no longer a possibility. It had begun. Jim Carrey, visibly shaken as he left the courthouse, avoided reporters and flashing cameras. He made no statement, but just hours later, at precisely 8 p.m., he emerged before the world again, this time in an unexpected, emotionally charged appearance on The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon. The atmosphere in the studio was different, heavier, quieter. Carrey sat across from Fallon, his posture slightly hunched, his face lined with exhaustion. But in his eyes, there was something unshakable. Resolve. "Jim, why now?" Fallon asked gently, his voice filled with concern. "Why did you decide to speak up?" Carrey took a long breath, his hands loosely folded. "I've kept this secret for too long," he said, his voice cracking ever so slightly. "It's been eating away at me, bit by bit, for years. Every time I saw Sean Combs on TV, every time one of his songs came on the radio, I'd remember that bathtub. I'd remember the eyes of others who never spoke. The silence. The fear. The loss." He paused, struggling with the weight of his memories. "The trauma from those years nearly destroyed me. In 2010, I had to seek professional help. Severe depression, chronic insomnia, panic attacks that came out of nowhere. I felt like I wasn't even living in my own skin anymore, like I was drifting in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from." His voice hardened, not with anger but with purpose. "I was terrified, but I also felt ashamed for not speaking out, for staying silent. And I kept thinking, if someone like me, a celebrity, a person with a voice, could be scared into silence, what about the others? The younger ones, the vulnerable ones. Would they ever get a chance to speak?" Carrey turned to the camera. The audience fell absolutely still. "I don't want anyone else to go through what I did," he said, emotion surging in his voice. "I want justice. I want the truth. and I want Hollywood to face the darkness it's allowed to thrive in behind closed doors. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't rehearsed. It was a moment of reckoning, live, raw, and unforgettable. Meanwhile, Diddy, through his legal team, issued a swift and categorical denial. Just hours after Jim Carrey's televised confession, a statement was released. At 6 p.m. on June 3rd. "These testimonies are outright fabrications," said a spokesperson for Mr. Combs. He vehemently denies any criminal wrongdoing. The tape in question depicts private, fully consensual moments between adults. This is nothing more than a blatant attempt to defame a great man and a music legend. But the tide had already turned. Public opinion, especially in the United States, had grown weary of celebrity denials. The era of blind reverence was over. The public no longer accepted polished statements as truth. That same evening, a Reuters poll revealed a stunning shift. Over 70% of respondents believed Diddy was guilty based on the available evidence and testimony. His lead attorney, Arthur Davies, appeared on Fox News, trying to contain the damage. "We will prove these accusations are false," he stated. "Every citizen is entitled to a fair trial. We will present our own evidence and witnesses to expose how these altered testimonies are being shaped by public pressure or personal grievances, not by fact." But the cracks in Diddy's defense widened with each passing day. Testimonies continued to emerge, haunting, detailed, and consistent. The trial was no longer just about one man's guilt or innocence. It had become a watershed moment for the entire entertainment industry, exposing how glamour and fame had, for decades, concealed patterns of coercion, manipulation, and abuse. Jim Carrey's testimony had blown open the doors. He'd stepped forward, not as a performer, but as a survivor, and in doing so, he gave others the courage to step into the light. Soon, stories began to pour in, from aspiring singers and backup dancers to renowned producers and A-list actors. Together, they painted a harrowing portrait of an elite circle where power was wielded like a weapon and silence was currency. Then, on June 10th, just 1 week after Carrey's testimony, Prosecutor Jenkins returned to court with a bombshell. New visual and audio evidence had been submitted anonymously. The material, she said, further corroborated allegations of ritualistic abuse and psychological manipulation by Diddy. The prosecution now had far more than words. They had recordings, images, timelines. The effect was immediate. Diddy's legal team was overwhelmed, and headlines across major outlets reflected the mounting pressure. The Wall Street Journal, the Los Angeles Times, and the New York Times all ran front-page stories detailing the unraveling of one,